So you're watching these moments. We have to apologize. We lost our shot here for a few moments, and we're back up. We hope we're back up to stay. As Jonathan Hunt, thank you very much to him in Los Angeles, was sort of keeping the rest of the coverage going here, and you can see the camera sort of around a bit at the U.S. Pacific Command. We just heard some very brief comments from the president as he began his discussions with Admiral Harris there. He will be briefed on the operations of the U.S. Pacific Command, 375,000 people strong. It covers, as I said earlier, 50% of the globe and 36 countries, rather. So the president will continue that briefing today, and he'll be obviously talking about plans that could potentially be put together for an attack of any kind of retaliation should North Korea fire off more missiles, and potentially the discussion of whether or not a missile launch should be intercepted by the United States, as we were just discussing earlier with General Tata and Mark Thiessen. So all of the military options that could potentially be on the table, are part of what are being discussed now. Guy Benson joins me. Ben Collins joins us as well. They were just speaking moments ago with Jonathan Hunt. As we look, gentlemen, and Victor Davis Hanson, thank you for being here as well today. As we take a look at the president as he begins this historic trip, and I know Victor Davis Hanson has written about the Second World Wars and the potential for war as it exists in the country today. The president obviously is up against some very serious circumstances, and essentially the decision about whether or not North Korea will be able to exist as a nuclear power. Victor Davis Hanson, let me get your thoughts on that first, sir.
Yeah, I think history sometimes repeats itself, sort of. And 80 years ago, we lost the appearance of deterrence in the Pacific, and Japan thought we were a spent power in the West in general. And it had this greater East Asian co-prosperity sphere where it bullied its neighbors, it carved out a new hegemony, and it was all predicated on the idea that although it was weaker than the United States, we hadn't made that clear. So I think 80 years later, what we want to do is plead with China, and I shouldn't say plead, but demonstrate to China that it's very dangerous that this North Korean client that they have let get out of control will evoke a response from us that they're not even they can't even imagine the magnanimity of it. The greatness of it. And I think right now we have to realize that deterrence is not just predicated on material resources, but will and clarity. And I think Donald Trump, after the failed pivot, is trying to explain to the region, our neighbors, our enemies, our allies, our rivals, that we can't have a nuclear North Korean peninsula. And he's got a whole list of sticks, and he has some carrots, in allowing China to get rid of the nukes peacefully, whereas we don't have to do some things that we wouldn't otherwise want to. So we want to restore deterrence. We don't want China to assume the role of Japan in the late 1930s.
It's a great point, and you feel it very potently sitting here in between the USS Arizona and the USS Missouri, where the Japanese signed their surrender on the deck. Ben Collins, your thoughts as the president takes all of this in and deals with this enormous weight of a potential nuclear North Korea as he ventures into this trip to try to keep that from happening?
Well, Martha, some of your previous guests have noted, I mean, this has been 25 years in the making. I mean, if you go, all the way back, to the first test, I mean, it was essentially, 1 kiloton. Now they've successfully tested 30 kilotons. That's about, 2 times the size of the bomb on Hiroshima. We've watched them go, build not just the nuclear capability, but also their missile technology. We've slowly watched over the years, and as Victor said exactly, we have essentially lost our ability to deter our enemies. And look, the reality is this is this is not in China's interest for North Korea to become a nuclear power as well, because China knows that if we have to respond, it will be a disaster that will leak into the Chinese borders, not just refugees, but also, possible nuclear material. And so I think China is actually going to have to really pay attention. And I think some of those levers of deterrence right now that President Trump can bring to bear is going to be the relationship that exists between the United States and China economically. And he's got some weapons in that arsenal that I think he's going to be willing to use at this point.
Yeah. Guy, in terms of this president and how very different he is from the most recent presidents in terms of the strategic patience that we saw under President Obama and, you know, the efforts towards peace, obviously, through the course of the last several presidencies. But this is a president who's not afraid to say, you know, rather bellicose things and to make threats and to have threats come back at him from Kim Jong-un. What are your thoughts as he goes forward to have one-on-one conversations with some of these individuals?
Well, he's very willing, Martha, to keep our allies and our adversaries totally off balance and off kilter and unsure about what he's going to do or say on any given day. I think there are disadvantages to that, but there are also some advantages. And it strikes me, Martha, the discussion that we were just hearing between Ben and Victor on very serious foreign policy issues are such a departure, or is such a departure, from all of the topics that are consuming Washington, D.C. right now. Everyone's talking about the Russia investigation and tax reform and some of the other dramas surrounding the administration. I think it's probably a good thing for this president to get out of D.C., out of the country, focus on some of these other issues that are very much important and ought to be a priority for any president. And we've seen in the past when he's gone abroad, it seems like he leaves some of the petty 24/7 news cycle behind him as well. I think that's probably a healthy thing to get 10, 11 days away from it and focus on these issues.
Yeah, Guy, I think you make an excellent point. And Victor, when you sit where we're sitting right now, you do feel the weight of those world events and of history, and it does make all of that seem rather petty.
Yeah, I think we need to remember that Iran is watching this as well, and that in the last 30 years, countries that went nuclear were anti-American, and we should warn China, and to a lesser degree Russia, that the next round of proliferation will probably be, I don't even want to imagine it, but would likely be Japan, South Korea, maybe Taiwan, and in the Middle East, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and they're either democratic or pro-American. And that's going to be a very different landscape as far as China is concerned, and they should try to avoid that. We're big adherents to non-proliferation, but if they keep pushing us, countries will take their security in their own hands, and it will be a marked departure from what we've seen in the past. It'll be more to our interest than China or Russia's.
Ben, what do you think about that?
Well, I agree, and I think one of the things that the Iran deal actually did is it sent a signal to the rest of the countries in that region, countries like Saudi Arabia, that they needed to catch up and become a nuclear country as well. Now, I think that what we're looking at right now in terms of North Korea and China, you know, a lot of we talk about what are we going to do in case, you know, North Korea becomes it's not like this story ends. If North Korea actually does prove that they have a intercontinental ballistic missile that is nuclear equipped, you know, we're still going to be dealing with a relatively young leader who's mentally unstable, and if he has that capability, you know, we're going to be that's going to be a problem every day for the next, until it's not.
I got to leave it there.
Thanks,
Ben
Martha.
Collins, Victor Davis Hanson, Guy Benson, thank you so much.